On November 23rd, 2026, Gukesh Domaraju and Javokhir Sindarov will compete for the World Chess Championship. Regardless of who wins, the match will mark the beginning of a new era. For the first time since Magnus Carlsen became world champion in 2013, none of the players who defined modern chess for over a decade will be sitting across the board. From Carlsen and Karjakin to Caruana, Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren, every World Championship cycle revolved around the same remarkable generation. And that's surprising because these players haven't disappeared. Caruana remains one of the strongest players in the world. Nepomniachtchi is still a regular contender in the candidates. Ding Liren became world champion only a few years ago. Yet today, the spotlight has shifted to a new generation, which raises an interesting question. How did one of the strongest generations in chess history produce so few world champions? Between 1990 and 1995, chess witnessed an extraordinary concentration of talent. Carlsen, Caruana, Nepomniachtchi, Karjakin, Ding Liren, Wesley So, Anish Giri, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and several others spent years at the very top of the game. Together, they won elite tournaments, crossed the 2,800 rating barrier, shaped modern opening theory, and repeatedly qualified for the candidates. Yet across more than a decade, this generation produced only two world champions. One was Magnus Carlsen himself. The other, Ding Liren, received his opportunity only after Carlsen voluntarily vacated the title. That was no coincidence, because unlike every great generation before them, they weren't waiting for an older champion to decline. They were trying to surpass someone who belonged to their own generation, and that someone was Magnus Carlsen. We first need to understand just how exceptional it really was. Between 1990 and 1995, chess witnessed one of the greatest concentrations of talent the game has ever seen. Magnus Carlsen, Sergey Karjakin, Ian Nepomniachtchi, Fabiano Caruana, Ding Liren, Wesley So, Anish Giri, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Many of these players would spend years among the world's elite. Several crossed the 2,800 rating barrier, won the strongest tournaments in the world, and became regular contenders in the candidates tournament. Karjakin challenged for the World Championship in 2016. Caruana earned his opportunity in 2018. Nepomniachtchi reached the World Championship match twice after winning back-to-back candidates tournaments. Ding Liren eventually became world champion in 2023. Very few generations in chess history can claim to have produced this many players capable of competing for the highest title. Despite producing so many elite players, this entire generation yielded only two world champions. One was Magnus Carlsen, the other became champion only after Magnus voluntarily stepped away from the title. That was not simply bad luck. It was the consequence of something modern chess had never really experienced before. Throughout history, world champions have almost always belonged to an older generation than their challengers. Emmanuel Lasker was nearly 20 years older than Jose Raul Capablanca. Garry Kasparov belonged to a different generation than Viswanathan Anand. Even Anand himself was well over a decade older than Magnus Carlsen when they met for the World Championship in 2013. The pattern was always the same. A dominant champion would eventually decline, creating space for the next generation to take over. Magnus Carlsen wasn't the established champion they had to wait out. He was one of them. Sergey Karjakin was born in January 1990. Ian Nepomniachtchi followed in July. Magnus Carlsen was born just 4 months later, in November of the same year. They played many of the same junior tournaments, climbed through the international rankings together, and entered elite chess at almost exactly the same time. More importantly, there was no obvious favorite during those early years. Karjakin became the youngest grandmaster in history. Nepomniachtchi repeatedly defeated Carlsen in junior events and maintained a positive classical score against him for many years. Even as teenagers, several players appeared capable of becoming the dominant force of their generation. But while they all became elite grandmasters, Magnus continued improving at a pace nobody else could match. By 2013, he had become world champion. Over the next decade, he defended his title 5 times, reached a record-breaking peak rating of 2,882, and remained the world's highest-rated player for almost the entire period. For Caruana, Karjakin, Nepomniachtchi, and everyone born alongside him, this created an extraordinary situation. They weren't chasing an aging champion nearing retirement. They were chasing their own contemporary, someone who had started the journey beside them but had somehow reached a level the rest simply couldn't. And the first player to discover just how difficult that challenge would be was Sergey Karjakin. In 2016, Karjakin won the candidates tournament and earned the right to challenge Carlsen for the World Championship in New York. Entering the match as the underdog, his chances were considered slim. Yet, after 8 games, he did what almost nobody expected. He defeated Carlsen with the black pieces and took the lead in the match. For the first time in years, the chess world saw Magnus Carlsen trailing in a World Championship. The advantage, however, proved difficult to hold. Carlsen struck back in Game 10, leveled the score, and eventually retained his title in the rapid tiebreaks. It remains the closest anyone came to taking the World Championship away from Magnus. While he still held the crown, Karjakin would continue competing at the highest level, but he would never again stand one match away from becoming world champion. If Karjakin came the closest, Fabiano Caruana may have reached the highest peak. His breakthrough arrived at the 2014 Sinkfield Cup, where he began the tournament with an astonishing 7 consecutive victories against one of the strongest fields ever assembled. The performance propelled him to a peak rating of 2,844, the third highest rating in chess history at the time, behind only Garry Kasparov and Magnus Carlsen. 4 years later, he earned his own World Championship match. The 2018 championship in London was remarkably balanced. Across 12 classical games, neither player managed to win a single game. Caruana had matched the world's strongest player over the classical portion of the match, but modern world championships are not decided by classical chess alone. The rapid tiebreaks told a different story. Carlsen won all 3 games, successfully defended his title, and once again, the challenger left empty-handed. Caruana's story did not end there. He remained among the world's elite, qualified for multiple candidates tournaments, and continued to win prestigious events. Yet with every passing cycle, the competition grew younger, making each opportunity increasingly difficult to reclaim. The next great challenger was Ian Nepomniachtchi. In many ways, Nepomniachtchi became the defining challenger of the Carlsen era. He won the candidates tournament twice in succession, an achievement few players in history can match. His first opportunity came in Dubai in 2021. For the opening half of the match, the contest remained evenly balanced. Then came Game 6, the longest game ever played in a World Championship match. After nearly 8 hours of play and 136 moves, Carlsen finally broke through. The psychological impact of that defeat proved enormous. Nepomniachtchi lost 4 more games before the match concluded, and Carlsen retained the title convincingly. 2 years later, Nepomniachtchi earned another chance. This time, Magnus Carlsen had chosen not to defend his title, leaving the championship vacant. Nepomniachtchi faced Ding Liren instead. After 14 closely fought classical games, the match was tied. It was decided only in the rapid tiebreak, where Ding emerged victorious. Twice Nepomniachtchi won the candidates. Twice he reached the World Championship. Twice he finished as runner-up. Yet these 3 players were only the most visible examples. Anish Giri spent years among the world's elite and became one of the most respected theoreticians of the modern era. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave crossed the 2,800 rating mark and won some of the strongest tournaments in the world. Wesley So established himself as one of the most consistent players of his generation and even defeated Carlsen to win the 2019 Fischer Random World Championship. In almost any other era, achievements like these might have led to a World Championship match or even a world title. During the Carlsen era, they did not. The only other player from this remarkable generation to become world champion was Ding Liren. His victory in 2023 was historic, making him China's first classical world champion. But the opportunity itself existed only because Magnus Carlsen chose not to defend his title after 11 years as champion. Ding seized that opportunity by defeating Nepomniachtchi in one of the most dramatic World Championship matches in recent history. His reign, however, brought immense pressure. A difficult year followed, marked by long absences from competition and an open struggle to rediscover both his form and confidence. When he defended the title against Gukesh in 2024, a single mistake in the final game decided the championship. By then, another generation had already begun to take over. For the players born between 1990 and 1995, the challenge was no longer just Magnus Carlsen. It was time itself. It is tempting to look at this generation and conclude that Magnus Carlsen denied them their moment. But history is rarely that simple. Caruana, Nepomniachtchi, Karjakin, Ding Liren, Wesley So, Anish Giri, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. These players built extraordinary careers. They won elite tournaments, pushed the boundaries of opening theory, crossed the 2,800 rating barrier, and remained among the world's best for years. By any reasonable standard, they were exceptional. Their misfortune was not a lack of ability. It was that one of the greatest players in chess history happened to belong to the very same generation. And by the time Magnus stepped away from the World Championship, another generation was already waiting. Gukesh, Sindarov, Pragnananda, Arjun Erigaisi. The opportunity that once seemed inevitable had become far more difficult to reach. History will remember Magnus Carlsen as one of the greatest champions the game has ever known. But perhaps it should also remember the generation that stood beside him. A generation strong enough to dominate almost any era in chess history. Yet remembered not for the titles it won, but for the one it spent a decade trying to take.